Hey, how's it going, everyone? I'm Carlo from All You Can Board. As always, I'm here with my cousin Dylan, and today we are doing episode 3 of our series called New Gamer Journey. So the basic idea for these, for those of you who aren't familiar, is we basically take one feature game. It's usually something fairly heavy and complex, and the idea is we're trying to give steps in terms of 4 games that would lead up, sort of gradually getting someone ready for a big game like this. So for this episode, we are doing Lisboa as the feature game. So we've each picked 4 games that we think are sort of the ideal stepping stones to ease someone into this. Behemoth here.
And it was voted on by patrons. This is the patrons' choice to do Lisboa. It was a very close vote with Gloomhaven, which we may do in a future video. Probably will do in a future video if I have anything to say about it. But yeah, Lisboa won it out, and I guess they just want us to have the hardest time possible because this was definitely the very hardest of the 3, no doubt.
Yeah, I think the first episode we did Feast for Odin, and in the second one we did Agricola, right? And those ones are games we've played a lot more. We've each only played Lisboa once, and it's the heaviest game we've probably played. So this is definitely, and it's been a while now. It's been over a year since we've played it, so this was definitely tough to put together, but yeah, I guess
we did our best.
Yeah, we really did, I think. So I think this is going to be a fun one, though.
Yeah, big time.
So before we do our actual lists, and one thing I'll say real quick, these are sort of, some people might actually use them for this purpose, but these more than anything are more like for entertainment. I think it's just a fun challenge for us to each, on our own figure out like what would I do to come up with as my ideal kind of lead up. But I don't know if people are necessarily going to go out and say, oh, I'm going to go teach this person these 4 games then to learn Lisboa, but it's kind of a fun exercise.
And I want to mention it too, because I think in both the other ones we had people comment in the comments, and I think we said it in those videos too, but I know that some people obviously will skip the different sections and stuff. But just to emphasize, like, this isn't, we're not saying you have to be able to introduce a game like Lisboa to every new gamer just because you're interested in it.
Right.
Like, every new gamer is not going to want to play Lisboa or be interested in it, or is it going to be the right thing to introduce them to? So yes, this is for sure entertainment value. It's more so, if you did, you're like, oh, I would really love to teach this person Lisboa. This path may work, and honestly, if you ever try our paths on any of these videos, I think we'd be very curious to know if they work. It's mostly for fun. At the end, we also ask that in the comments, you can pick which person you think has the better list in terms of which one will be more effective in getting to Lisboa for someone. That's always interesting to talk about, but definitely take this with don't take this too seriously. We took our time and put time into like making these picks, but obviously Lisboa is not right for everybody.
Yeah, like when Dylan always asks me, how long do you think it would take for you to teach your dad how to play Lisboa like competently? And it's like, well, this video isn't for that because my dad's never going to play Lisboa. So
yeah, exactly.
Okay, so yeah, I'm going to throw it over to you to kick it off and tell us your little progression.
Do you want to give the people an overview
of Lisboa?
Yeah,
sorry, first? I should give people an overview of Lisboa. Okay, so Lisboa is an epic 1 to 4 player game designed by Vital Lacerda, artwork from Ian O'Toole, and the setting is 1755 in Lisbon, which is the capital of Portugal. I know it sounds ridiculous that I'm clarifying this, but there are plenty of reviews and things online. People have said that Lisbon is in Spain when talking about this game. It's pretty offensive, so I do have to clarify. They speak Portuguese in Lisbon. This is in Portugal. So there was an earthquake in 1755 that destroyed most of the city. It was on fire. There was tsunamis, whatever. And you're basically rebuilding the city. Most of what you do in the game, everyone has their own little player board, but there's also a giant board with all these different areas you go to. There's 3 main sort of characters: the king, the Marquise de Pombal, who's like affiliated with the church, and then there's Manuel de Maia, the builder. You're playing cards to kind of interact with these people, get favors from them to build the city in different ways. It's a very complex game. There's all kinds of different areas on the board, and it's all kind of like clockwork. Everything intertwines. If you're familiar with other Vital Lacerda games, you'll probably notice a bit of that, but I'll leave it at that for now, I think, just because a lot of the mechanisms are going to come up more as we talk about why we've picked these games and how they lead into these.
Yeah. Okay, I'm doing my list first. Really quickly before I do the list, what's the name of the square called where the statue is again?
That is actually, I think that's the Marquise de Pombal, actually, right by the Parque Eduardo de Sete.
Do you think in our lifetime we'll ever, you and me, play Lisboa in that square?
We certainly could. We've both been
but
to
someone
this.
has to pack this game and take it to Portugal.
I'm sure there's copies of Lisboa in Portugal somewhere. That's a good question, though.
But then they'll be in Portuguese. And anyways.
Oh wait, and how many overlaps do you think there are going to be? Minimum 1, right?
Okay, I'm gonna guess 2, but I think it's very possible there's 3.
Damn. Okay. Yeah, I'll guess 2 as well. All right, kick it off.
Okay, my first game, so I'll say with this one, the other videos I started a lot lighter and I really worked up. Because this is such a heavy game, the way I approached this was right from the get-go, you need to be willing to learn some not heavier rules, but learn more and maybe have a bigger barrier to entry because you're having to get to a very big learn. You can't start with a game like Sequoia and be like, somehow this is going to transition, because at that point you're losing a game there, because you need to almost learn how to learn board games a little bit. So
I feel like you're stealing my preamble here.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
So the first game I picked in this case is one that Carlo is a very, very big fan of.
This is the overlap.
And this is Race for the Galaxy.
What?
Yeah, so Race for the Galaxy.
Oh, I thought you were joking. I thought you were talking about something else.
No.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I guess I see what you mean.
I thought you, yeah.
Okay, no. So
we'll come back to that.
Race for the Galaxy is my first pick. The way I usually do these videos is I pick different mechanics that are in the game, and I try to introduce them gradually. One of the mechanics in Lisboa is using cards in multiple different ways. So it's not just like you pick up a card and you just like, oh, that's the ability I play for this. Sometimes you're playing to different areas in Lisboa, or depending which area you play it to, it's getting different effects, whatever the case may be. So I tried to look at a game that wasn't too complicated, that used cards in multiple ways, even if it was just using them as like essentially a cost to pay for another card or whatever. That's why Race to the Galaxy comes in. I feel like it's not a super easy game to learn the first time, even though the rules are very not complicated in Race for the Galaxy. And when you know them, the game plays really quick. I know that for me, when I played Race for the Galaxy, there was a bit of a barrier to understanding some of the concepts and really understanding the strategy and all that kind of stuff. I struggled with it the first couple times before it really clicked for me. So I feel like that could help with really having to, right from the get-go, get over that learning barrier while also learning a mechanic that's present in a different way, but a mechanic concept that's present in Lisboa. So that's why I picked Race for the Galaxy. It was the right weight for me for a first game for this list, and it teaches you one of the mechanics that you can kind of come to expect, and it's just a fun game. So that was my first pick, Race for the Galaxy. I thought you'd appreciate that pick a lot.
I do appreciate it. That's awesome to hear. And there's two other things about it that I think you might have maybe undersold here. One is the iconography system. If you can get over the hurdle of the iconography in Race for the Galaxy, that's going to kind of really help you get into the iconography in this. And the other thing is the whole ability to piggyback off your opponents. Because in this one, when you interact with the nobles, your opponents can say, oh, I'm going to follow you to also interact.
Oh, that's a good
and
point.
that kind of happens in Race for the Galaxy. The kind of oh, you're doing that action, I will also do that action. So
I'm unintentionally a genius.
Yeah, and I almost picked Race for the Galaxy for my list. I'll say right now, it's not on there because there's a similar, but anyways, very nice pick. Yeah, I like it.
Sweet.
I'm surprised by it, but I like it.
So that was my first pick. My second pick, which, you know what, let's move this off the table for now, just so that I can bring games on here that have more room.
Also, I'm just thrilled that I heard you say the words Race for the Galaxy is a fun game. You said it's a fun. I didn't. Really
I don't think it's a bad game. It's just
No, I just didn't think that you found it fun.
That's
Anyways, take it away. Second game.
My next pick is the one that I would pretty much think is going to be a crossover on this list, because I think it kind of needs to be included on a list like this. And that is Mercado de Lisboa.
Yeah. And see, that's what when you said, "Oh, well, Carlo's going to be very happy about," I thought you were joking about
right, because you weren't the biggest fan.
Because
I
wasn't exactly.
So Mercado de Lisboa is based off Lisboa, and it's by the same designer, and it takes one aspect of the board and basically turns it into the full game. So it's a shoe-in, almost a cheat pick in some ways to kind of include it here, but necessary to teach someone, I think, Lisboa, because you can start with a friendlier theme in some ways, at least in terms of what you're looking at and understanding it. I think it's just more approachable that way, and it's basically teaching you one full aspect of Lisboa. There's differences. It's not a one-for-one copy, but if you know how to play Mercado de Lisboa a lot, I think when you get to the teach of Lisboa, that section you can be like, okay, remember when we played Mercado de Lisboa? That's basically what's going on here. Here's how it works in this game. Yeah. Much easier to get that out of the way, and also then it'll shorten the teach overall, which is one of the most important things.
It basically covers one of the corners of the Lisboa board.
Yeah, so it's I won't get into the full mechanics of Mercado de Lisboa, but it's essentially like having to place different. It's almost like it's a market, and so you basically have different stalls and everything like that. Whereas in Lisboa, it's different types of buildings, right?
The stores, and then there's public buildings around the outside, and then the stores go in the middle along the streets.
Yeah, so I feel like this is almost an essential pick for this list.
Definitely.
I almost considered reaching out to you at some point, being like, do we just choose not to do this game? But in many ways, if we're also putting the entertainment part aside for a second, saying if someone's going to use this list, what's going to make it biggest chance for success, I think you almost have to include Mercado.
Yeah, you have to.
So that's why it's on here. It basically is in many ways a prequel to Lisboa, if you want to call it that or whatever. It came after the fact, but it just takes
like I'm pretty sure that's why they decided to make it, or like part of it was like they specifically said, I think even in the Kickstarter campaign, like use this, and then I think it even came with a promo tile that you could use in Lisboa when you play it. So
exactly. So obvious pick, but that is the second one, Mercado de Lisboa. And now we get into some of the ones that it was a bit trickier. So this one really takes it a step up.
Here.
This takes it a step up from the last one. And really, it's me coming back. I'm going to pull it onto the table before I talk about it.
I was going to say, where's this game?
My third pick is Root. And the reason I went with Root is, so I came back to the dual use cards. Root also has dual use cards where it has the ability on the card, but it also has the suit of the card, and you're using it for potentially two different things, but in a much more complex package. Root is a pretty tough learn. It's not a tough game when you're actually playing, you know the rules. In fact, a game of Root can go like in an hour and a half, depending on how like who you're playing with and how it goes. But I know that sitting down to learn Root the first time, even having to learn it to teach recently, I had to teach it to two other people. There is a lot to go over, and even though it doesn't have, Lisboa doesn't have the asymmetrical nature of these different factions, the teach is with all those factions does start to like really push the barrier of what someone who's like really getting you into board games, if you're trying to get up to Lisboa, is going to be okay with. And so to me, it's like, hey, let's bring back one of the mechanics from Race of the Galaxy. Remember those dual use cards? Like, let's bring those back, but now let's also introduce you to the fact that there's going to be a lot of stuff you have to learn in this game to enjoy it and be successful. So that's sort of why I went with this one. It wasn't to introduce necessarily a new mechanic. It was basically just like, let's use a mechanic you already know, but now teach you a whole bunch of other stuff to get you ready for the teach of Lisboa. For me, Lisboa is less about more than anything, it's preparing someone to learn it. Like, obviously, like, you can look at it as like to play effectively, to enjoy it. But for me, a game like Lisboa, you almost just have to prepare someone for like, yes, we're gonna have to sit down for potentially an hour, and you're gonna have to ask questions, and we're gonna have to really make sure you understand this game before we get into it. Root is just sort of the next step in preparing them for that.
Cool.
That is Root. The next one.
I played it the one time. I gotta play more Root.
Oh, it's so good. The last one I don't own. You own. I almost asked you to bring it, but then you would have known it was on my list. Maybe you did bring it, and it's going to be on your list. I don't know.
I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, and
You think so?
No,
okay.
Just go ahead.
So the last one on mine is Praga Caput Regni. And this one specifically is on here because one of the elements in Lisboa, and it's not unique to Lisboa, it's in a lot of games, is your personal player board having an impact on the game, and also like revealing things with cubes on it, and that being a big thing you're managing. Basically, in Praga Caput Regni, I think it's been a while since I played, but essentially you're removing cubes, and then what is under there, you're either getting points or bonuses, or more income on your resources and things like that. It's not like
the confusing thing about Praga is some places it's when you take a cube, it's what you reveal, and other places it's what you cover with the cube.
Right.
But yes, there's either way, it's very, very similar.
And I feel like those kind of personal player boards are in many ways a staple of this game is going to be a complex learn or a complex game, because not only are you learning the shared board, I should say in a game that also has a shared space, but not only are you learning the rules of the game and the shared board, you're having to learn how to manage your player board to interact with that. And so that's one aspect of Lisboa that makes it look even more daunting, is like, not only do you have this massive board that looks busy and has a lot going on, you also have this personal player board that has a whole bunch going on that you
That's what I was
personally
gonna say.
have to
It's
manage.
not like in other games where your player board has like one thing or two things. It's like your own player board in those games has like 4 or 5 different things going on, that your dual recessed board with, Yeah.
So for me, this was just a game that I had played recently. It's a newer game. I enjoyed it a lot. So in that way, I think it's just going to be a fun experience for someone. It's a step up from Root in learning. It's a step under Lisboa for the rule complexity as well. I think it's sort of that next really good next step. I'm sure I can almost guarantee there's a better choice for this spot in terms of complexity, maybe even being higher than Praga, but not quite Lisboa, that also has the player board. I just haven't played it. I mean, we just were at a friend's and he was showing us Clinic that also has a personal player board. Like, there's other options I'm sure that can come up, but other games I played, it just the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what, I think this is probably the best I can prepare someone to learn Lisboa and also introduce another aspect, which is the personal player board. And from there you go to Lisboa and you cross your fingers that it doesn't isn't so daunting. They just decide board games aren't right for them in complete in their life at all. But that's the best I could do to get from what was my first game, Race for the Galaxy, to Lisboa, which I'm pretty sure that if
I did not see that pick coming. The Race for the Galaxy pick, I did not expect.
See, I thought our crossovers were going to be Race for the Galaxy, Mercado, and Praga. But I thought there was a chance one of them wasn't there. That's why I guessed 2. But that's where I thought it could be 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, take it away.
No, I want to ask you something first.
Yes.
Are there any games that just missed the cut? Like anything that you just that you were really close to putting on there, but you just left it off for a certain reason last second, or
nothing that like there was. It really, when it came down to it, I wasn't deciding between 2. If anything, I was really struggling to find one that when I did for a spot, I was like, okay, yeah, like I'm happy with this. I'm gonna put it here. There was nothing that almost made it off. It made me realize there's a lot of games that had I played, it could have been on the list. Like. Because I obviously, when we do these videos, I do some research to make sure there's nothing I'm forgetting that I play and stuff. And one that came up when I clicked on Board Game Geek for the mechanics and I clicked and showed other games with it was Brass. Brass came up for one of them, and I even saw someone in a thread somewhere talking about comparisons between Brass and Lisboa. So
interesting.
And not in general. I think because I haven't played Brass, so I don't know. But I might have. It was either with the dual use cards being similar or something like that. It was something that I was like, oh, if I had played this game, this may have been a perfect one for this list. I just haven't played it, so that's the closest I got.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know a ton about Brass, but knowing what I know about Martin Wallace games, usually being very mean and high player interaction, I would have never assumed it had much in common.
And I'm not sure which
Lisboa.
version it was. I don't know if it was Birmingham or Lancashire.
Oh,
or the
okay.
original or what.
I think Birmingham is the less harsh one, a little more open. But
Right.
Anyways, doesn't matter.
All right.
Okay, cool.
Let's hear it.
So we are going to kick it off. You're going to start your journey not with Race for the Galaxy, but with Mercado de Lisboa.
Let's get
Get that back up here.
Just in case they forgot. There you go. Okay.
So Mercado de Lisboa, the main reason is kind of what Dylan said, is just like the game here is basically just replicating one of the segments of the board in Lisboa, and it's probably the most important and most involved part of the board in Lisboa. So much of what you do happens with that kind of grid with your buildings around the outside and then the stores in the middle, and you have to collect certain types of rubble to use on certain build. Like there's so many steps involved to either getting the right store out there to line up with the buildings, or to put the building out there to line up with the stores afterwards to get points, that it's like, yeah, there's a lot of other ways to get points in the game in Lisboa. Like, I'm not saying that whoever wins is going to be whoever got the most in there necessarily, but like you can't play Lisboa successfully and ignore that area. So like you're going to have to interact with that a whole bunch, and there's so many moving parts that I think this is like, if there was any aspect of the board in Lisboa that you could learn in advance going into it that would ease the teach, I think it would be the part that you learn from Mercado de Lisboa. So of all the games I'm going to be talking about here, Mercado de Lisboa is the one I enjoy the least. I don't think it's particularly interesting or exciting. It's a little bit dull in my opinion, but I think it does, is kind of the perfect starting step for Lisboa.
Yeah, for sure. And then they just have to release Nobles de Lisboa, and eventually we'll have all the mechanics in Lisboa.
Exactly. Okay, then from Mercado de Lisboa, we're going into slot number 2, and this is where I had considered Race for the Galaxy. Okay, I had considered a few different games for here. Race for the Galaxy, Puerto Rico. I considered I was really close on Innovation. And the main reason I was considering these games is because of the combination of two things: the multi-use cards, which you touched on, but also the aspect of the following other players, which I mentioned for Race for the Galaxy. So in all of these games, but I'll bring up the one.
Can I guess what it is? Because thinking about the following players, is it Corrosion?
No, but actually, Corrosion was another one I thought of kind of last second, but I just thought this other one was a little more. Right. But it's Glass Road.
Oh yeah, of course.
And it's another game that I don't want to say unfortunately, but like I like to try and diversify what games we talk about on the channel. I know I've mentioned Glass Road in another video recently as well, but there truly was no other game that felt like it fit this spot better, because even though, again, Innovation, Race for the Galaxy, all these other games have ways that you can follow your opponent, those are all different type. They're like tableau building games, or they don't have a lot of other stuff in common with Lisboa. Whereas this, not only does it have the thing where if I play a card, I'm trying to play something that I don't think my opponents are going to be able to follow me. Yeah. Like in Lisboa, but this is also a resource management and conversion game. And in Lisboa, you're shipping and delivering like acquiring and selling goods. So there's a bit of like acquiring resources and then sending them off kind of thing. So I just think in terms of like a strategy Euro game that has like a heavy emphasis on resources and stuff like that, the Glass Road was the most similar to Lisboa and gives you that kind of first step of that. The other thing I want to touch on about Glass Road is that, and one thing quickly about Lisboa actually. The BGG weight for Lisboa, I looked up before I came over, 4.57.
Wow.
heaviest game in my entire collection, heaviest game I've ever tried. Like the scale only goes up to 5, so it's like very, very, very heavy. And there's like, it's sort of like when you play these really, really, really heavy games, there's almost 3 levels of playing a game like Lisboa, okay? There's level 1 is you're looking at your own board and your own cards, okay? You're looking down in front of you. 80%, 90% of the game is what you have in front of you. Then you kind of like evolve to step 2, which is now I'm looking at the main board more and I can actually pay attention to what's going on here. Step 3 is when you actually feel comfortable with the game, is where you can actually start looking at what other people are doing.
Right.
And you're like, okay, now I've come comfortable enough with my own strategy and I understand what's going on here that now I can start making my decisions based on what's going to impact the other players. And that's such an important part of Glass Road, and I think it's a great first step to have that kind of like, okay, I got my resources, I got my cards, but what are other people up to and how can I prevent them from getting extra actions? So that's where that comes into play.
That's a great pick.
Thank you. So that is step 2, Glass Road. Step 3 is a game I don't have the physical version of, and I've never played the physical version of. I've only played it on Board Game Arena. And it's one that you haven't played.
Okay.
This is La Granja.
Oh, okay.
The second I played this game...
Isn't this the reason you hate Quedlinburg?
No, you're thinking of El Grande.
Oh, that's it. Right.
2 letters and then 6 letters, Spanish name. Yeah, El Grande,
and I say that
La Granja.
If you don't know, it's because Carlo wanted to introduce that game to us multiple times, and for some reason we kept playing Quacks instead.
People kept saying, well, it's really Quacks. And I'm like, I want to teach El Grande. No, La Granja is different.
Yeah.
But the second I played La Granja, I went, oh my god, this is kind of like Lisboa. And it's the multi-use cards, but in like, this is like next level multi-use cards. So in La Granja, it's also a fairly long strategy Euro game, a lot of similar stuff. There's a common area it's not really like the grid in Lisboa where you're like building the buildings and stores, but there's something where you're putting out stands for selling goods and there's kind of an area majority. So there's like a common area where you're kind of sharing the board with other players, but you're also doing your own stuff. But the main reason I picked La Granja for this is it's a fairly complex game, but again, those multi-use cards. So the cards have 4 aspects to them. There's something on the top, which is showing you the goods that this card would need to have put on it in order to ship these goods to the market.
Right.
Then on like the other side, it shows you which resources it might be giving you. So like grain, olives, whatever. The right side of the card shows you whether you can increase your like pig supply or your, I think your wagons or something like that. I can't remember what it is. And then the bottom of the card has a text ability. And you have your personal player board, and when you play a card, you have to choose which of the 4 sides of the board you're tucking the card under, so that so if you tuck it into the top, you're going to cover up all the sides and only the top of your card's going to show up. So you're playing the card as for it's like the resources it can hold. But if you had played it on the bottom instead of your player board, you're using it for the ability, but you lose the other parts of the card. Cool. Yeah, and in Lisboa, we haven't got into it yet, but all you do, like, not all you do, it's a very involved game, but people always kind of like joke about,
it's simple.
All you do is Lisboa, you just play a card and do what it says. And like technically it's true, but there's multiple ways you can play your cards. You can play it onto the board to visit one of those nobles, or you can play your card into your portfolio, and there's a bottom half and a top half, and if you tuck the card into the top of your portfolio, you get one half of the ability, whereas if you tuck it under the bottom, you get the other half. So as soon as I played La Granja, I was like, oh my god, it's Lisboa.
Let's just start teaching. Whenever we teach games now to anyone, the first thing we need to do is just distill it down to a single mechanic and just start with, all you do is this. Like we're teaching Feast for Ocean. All you do is just put this little guy on the map. That's it.
Yeah.
That's
you just fill your board.
You just take this little guy.
You don't know how to put puzzle pieces?
Yeah. Just make it sound super simple, then slowly.
Yeah. That's all you need. Just play a card.
Yeah.
So yeah, La Granja, great game. Only played it once, but yeah, that of all the games I could possibly think of that did multi-use cards, especially the way you tuck them under your board and that they have the multiple things going on, and the fact that it's got resource-heavy stuff like Lisboa, like this just felt like a really natural, easy pick. And then the last one is going to be another overlap pick, unfortunately, and that is Praga Caput Regni.
Unfortunately. That just means that we have such a good mind melds on the way we approach these videos that it's interesting to see more than other overlaps, like how our brains have come to the same conclusions.
For sure. Even though different, like Root and La Granja are like totally different games, and like Glass Road, Race for the Galaxy, and even we got Mercado de Lisboa in a different spot as well, So with Praga Caput Regni, there's a couple things. Beyond what Dylan mentioned, I'll try not to tread on too familiar territory here, but one thing is that the designer, first of all, Vladimir Suki, this is the only game of his I've played, Praga Caput Regni, but I've heard him compared a lot to Vital Lacerda in the sense that they have these games where the board is usually massive, there's multiple different, like, it's almost like a series of mini games across the board, and they're all interconnected, and your turns have this thing where you're like, I can do this, which will then spiral into that, which will then be this thing, which I'm going to need to go buy this thing here, which I can then sell later for like everything feels like this domino effect, these chain reactions. And so that's just like, I initially thought of putting Vinuj in this slot because I was like, maybe just playing another Vital Lacerda game, and especially a very thematic one like Vinuj. What's made me the rules stick with me a bit over the years, even though I don't play it as much, is because I just think like thematically what would make sense in the game, and I think playing something like that really helps.
I honestly think we might get people in the comments who have played them, these Lacerda games, surprised we didn't pick Vinuj.
Yeah.
Because I thought you might have it. I came close, but the thing is, I've only played it once, and it was so long ago. But it came up a lot with mechanics. I was like, it's the same designer. In many ways, it feels like for a game like Lisboa, with that's that heavy with that designer, having another one of his games under your belt would really help. But I don't think besides Mercado de Lisboa, like I haven't played another of his heavy games besides Vinuj, and Vinuj I think is more approachable. So
it is, and that's the thing. So Vinuj I think would be a perfect stepping stone if you wanted to play a Vital Lacerda game. And again, because the theme in Lisboa, if you don't know the history of the rebuilding of the city, it's a little like it's very thematic. But without knowing the history, you might not understand why it's thematic. Whereas like winemaking is like, it just makes sense in terms of like growing your grapes, having a cellar, aging your wine, the weather comes into play, etc., etc. So it's very close to picking Vinuj. But the other thing that I think is awesome about Praga that leads you into Lisboa is that, so Vital Lacerda is Portuguese, and Lisboa was made as kind of like a love letter to the city of Lisbon. And Vladimir Suki is Czech, and he designed Praga Caput Regni as kind of a love letter to the city of Prague. So it's like each of these kind of iconic heavyweight designers designing a game that is like about their presumably favorite city, and you're also rebuilding the city on this giant board. It's also a very long strategy game. And then after I settled, I was like, oh, it's already the perfect fit. And then I realized something else about Praga Caput Regni. It also has the halfway point checkpoint thing like Lisboa, where the game is kind of divided in two. Where in Lisboa, the first like 10 years, like because the game plays over like 20 years thematically or whatever, and when any player collects their second set of rubble cubes or whatever, it triggers the halfway point. A bunch of the cards are basically taken out of the game, and you basically enter like phase 2 of the game, like the second half of the game, and there's like more points up for grabs. The cards are more powerful, etc., etc. And a very similar thing happens in Praga Caput Regni, where that action wheel turns a certain number of times, and then when this little cube falls, it's kind of telling you, hey, this is the second phase of the game now. More points up for grabs, different actions that come up, different things that happen. So it's more approachable. It's a game that you could read through the rulebook once, sit down, play it. It also has a solo mode where you could prepare for it in the same way that you could play the solo mode of Lisboa to get ready to play with friends. There's so many similarities in these, but Praga Caput Regni is definitely like a full like notch of complexity below Lisboa. Like Praga Caput Regni is a game that even after not playing for months, I could go pick up the rulebook, refresh on a few things, and get back into it. Whereas Lisboa would take a lot more to get back into.
But I will say that for a new gamer, Praga is going to feel like a mountain in some ways to scale. So I think that's really going to help with their confidence going into a game like Lisboa.
It's like the litmus test. It's like if you can handle Praga, and that would be one thing too, is if someone plays Praga and they're like, whoa, this is already too much, this is overwhelming, then maybe you don't show them Lisboa. Because honestly, like if Praga is too much, they're not going to enjoy Lisboa. But if they like it and you can see them kind of, that twinkle in their eye, they're enjoying themselves and they're kind of like, they're figuring it out, then that's a good stepping stone to it. So those were mine. The only other game I wanted to mention real quick that almost made it in that same slot other than Vinuj, I almost put in Imperial Steam. I was thinking of other games. The only reason why would have been, because it's very different network building, whatever. The only reason was the influence. Because in Lisboa, there's you have that influence scale, and you sometimes lose influence, or you need a certain number of influence to interact with someone somewhere. And obviously in Imperial Steam, there's that influence meter that allows you to go a certain place on the board, but it's just impossible to cover every mechanism. That
was a good list. I think you definitely had better emphasis and did a better job of incorporating the following mechanic. I didn't. I honestly I didn't forget that was in Lisboa, but I forgot it was as important and like at least to like do play it well and strategically. And I think that you have more inclusions and just better representation of that. Where I think I might have spent and I think I do this in most of them. I spend more time on trying to come up with a natural progression on just the overall complexity of how do you get someone to the point of being able to be taught a game like
how do you get them in the mindset or prepared and wanting to play that game? So
but again, you can never accomplish both sides of every way to approach this new gamer journey in 4 games. You kind of I like that we each kind of always have an emphasis on a different aspect, which then makes it easier when you get to this point where you guys can now go to the comments and let us know who do you think would be more successful with, or whose journey do you think would be more successful with a new gamer? Whose would you try first? Which one do you like more? Because we'd obviously love to hear that. Do you pick Carlo's list? Do you pick mine? Do you think that both are ridiculous and this is just never going to happen in 4 games?
For anyone who's played Lisboa more than once, are you sitting here being like, what are these guys doing? There's so many better games. Like, I'm curious, what games would you suggest? And I will say real quick, maybe take it a little easy on Dylan, because I've owned Lisboa. Like, he doesn't own Lisboa. I've had it at my house. I've set it up multiple times to learn it multiple times. I've almost played it through solo. I had it at home to read through the rules,
Carlo's
look
been
at the
preparing
components
for this for years.
Yeah, exactly. So totally unfair advantage. No, but seriously, I think you had a great list too.
Thanks. And that's it. Those are our picks. So again, like we said, go to the comments. Let us know which journey you think you like better, which one would be more successful. Let us know how you would get someone to Lisboa in 4 games. We're always interested to see what games you pick, because I think in the other videos when I've read them, I'm like, oh, that's a great choice, or that's a great list. So always interested to hear it. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back again with another one of these sometime in the near future. And if you are a patron, or if you become a patron, you'll be able to vote on which game we cover next for this as well.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.